Now we'd like to introduce Deborah Colvin is the Deputy Director in charge of partner support for Natic Esperanza, a grant-making organization supporting grassroots organizations in the Chiapas and Guatemalan highlands. She came to Mexico as a volunteer in 1987 and has lived there ever since. Her academic studies include BAs in psychology and philosophy, and specialties in virtual tutoring and the creation of virtual learning environments. In Mexico, she led an educational leadership program in Chiapas and is currently a professor in the Bachelor of English Teaching program at the La Universidad Autónoma de Chiapas. She has been a classroom teacher and elementary school principal and works as a coach for principals and district supervisors in Mexican public schools. Her earlier work in the placement and orientation of service learning students from Mexican universities and Fulbright scholars in Mexico has given her a unique perspective regarding the current challenges in the service learning program of NATIC. Welcome, Deborah.
Well, I think it's a really hard follow after these fantastic presentations, but the connection couldn't be better. And what I want to talk about really today, there's so many things that we could talk about in so little time, but what I do want to talk about is what happens when you're in an organization that is between the institutions, the host local grassroots organizations, and the students, and not between in a bad sense, but living in that tense, that space of tension where there are needs on all around, and everybody has been struggling for a long time to understand how to accommodate what from their position is needed, and really the vision and the dreams that we have for a different kind of interaction and for a more just and healthy kind of exchange between everybody involved. And so I'm here to talk about our mistakes in the TEAC, really, and the things that I'm going to talk about have more to do with our reflections than any kind of critique of some other organization, because it really is on us where we can go from here. And I think that is just the only place that any one of us can start from. You know? So I'm a tech person, but I've never used a clicker. What do I point it at? Where do I point it? To you. Wait, okay. All right then, so I just want to say that these are two of the areas that NATIC works in, and one has to do with global community alliances, where we are cultivating these alliances with universities and organizations and religious organizations and anyone who really wants to participate in the exchanges, as well as the local experts and the people who are on the ground in Chiapas and in Guatemala actually doing the work. So we work with them in many different ways. And then our main work really has to do with grant making. So we raise funds for our partners, and at the same time, we work on supporting them in whatever kind of development that they're interested in and ready to work on it. And ready when I mean when they say this is what we need. So these are our partners right now. And one really wonderful thing on the left, it's Antasic. And that's a group of women who started out as domestic workers, just trying to organize legally to get basic rights for their work in San Cristobal. And they are a group who most of them are kind of exiles or refugees from indigenous communities in the highlands. And when I say refugees or exiles, I'm really talking about economic exile. So they needed to come in. And the funding that they have is a new program that we have called the Seed Fund. And that funding for the first project was given to us it was raised by high school students who had been on a cultural immersion in Chiapas before. And when the pandemic hit and they couldn't come, they donated the money, plus raised some money. And that gave us the dream of being able to expand partnerships. So that's just an example of one of the positive things that can come out of these exchange programs. I don't want to paint a black picture at all. It's just a wonderful thing to participate in. And then the larger one in the middle is Rukush. And the reason I want to talk specifically about them for a moment is because the scholarship students that we've supported with Rukush in Santiago Atitlan in Guatemala, they decided to develop their own training and immersion program for the organizations around the lake. So they went and they learned how to teach Sutukil, which is their language. And these are high school and junior high students and who are now university students. And they started their own organization. And so they organize homestays. We supported them as much as we could. They've made their own mistakes. But just as it was beginning to build up was when COVID hit. So that had to stop for a moment, but it looks like there's going to be an opportunity to build it back up. And what they do is partner with the local organizations. When they're getting volunteers, they go through this program and they have to stay in a homestay, and they take the local language before they can go and volunteer in the organizations. And that's just been a real joy to participate in. All right, so this is just kind of our process over the years that we've been working. We started out, we still get volunteers that want to work directly with us, but then we were getting volunteers and helping place them in the organizations that we support. And we were third-party providers for organizing the placements for internships, students from universities. And then that expanded into working with universities that are wanting to bring down their immersion groups or course studies, and working directly with them to develop the programming. The person who's really in charge of that is my director, Anita Smart, who's also part of APLEC. And then the green one there is where we are now. We're working a lot more with virtual placements just because of the situation. But alongside of that, what we've been doing is working with our partner organizations to learn how to use technology in a way that seems helpful to them with the infrastructure that they all already have. And the idea is that they will begin to more actively participate in the design of these placements in the courses, because that's the part that we had been leaving out. So there it is, the three groups. We're kind of in there in the middle between we're a host, but we're also not a host. And they all have these things that they want to be able to achieve. And I think that Hannah was really talking about that. Great. So I'm going to skip that part and move on. So this is what it looks like when you're imagining it, and how the students, these are real photographs of actual placements, but this is kind of where we think it's going to go. But often this is where it really goes. And, from the point of view of the volunteers or the students, so a lot of times they get there and they've got this project that they developed with a director or something like that from the university, and it's not contextualized. I mean, it's not that they didn't try to do that, but it's really hard to do that from Colorado or from Maryland or something like that if you're not in constant communication with the people where you're going to be. And we, for a while, tried to be like the intermediaries of that. And what we found is that we don't necessarily translate it well. And we needed to be facilitating really those conversations rather than substituting the conversations. The students want to do good, but what is that? and what's going to happen afterwards, and who does the knowledge belong to, and really what it is that they're bringing. If you're coming down and the focus previously was on the student and they're having a good experience and having a project, then what they do possibly is leave some kind of process or some product with the organization, but it isn't necessarily what the organization wanted. And it isn't necessarily organized in a way that is useful to them. Another thing that's happened from the point of view of the host, and that's the last part I'm going to talk about in the next one, but is that there's supposed to be this mentoring going on, but the idea from our partners about what mentoring really is completely different. And the way mentoring occurs in the Indigenous organizations and communities is a different process. And so we found ourselves stepping in and kind of, making up for the lack, instead of looking at it as this is an incredible opportunity to change mentoring. And so that was our paradigm change. So the idea of moving away from placing people who's got particular skill sets into a place where that skill set is missing, that still happens, but that's not the reason that we're doing it anymore. And the idea has to be with whose knowledge is going to be shared and what happens in that construction and in that special private place, that intimate space is where the real intercultural exchanges happen. So there it is. This is a bunch of stuff, but these are the things that we're starting to do and that we're wanting to do. And part of it has to do with really, just insisting that what our partners in Guatemala were doing and saying, we're going to organize our own homestays and have you learn something of our language. We decided we probably really need to insist on that as something that's part of, for the long placements anyway. And one of the things that is my job this year is to work with the organizations that are going to be hosting to help them communicate what is mentoring from them. I mean, there's a lot of academic information, but in a way that in a kind of a document, a toolkit that is translatable for them in their own context, and they can give it to their students, they can give it to the incoming volunteers. And if there are things that the universities or the organizations need, that's where we can step in and say, okay, well, that part of the mentoring, we can do that. We don't have to make someone else use their time that they're not even getting paid for to be doing that. And then the other thing is to try to work with the organizations and the institutions to change that structure where really the people that are volunteering are the hosts, and say, your time is what really, really needs to be paid for because your knowledge is what people are coming for. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.